This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics. I'm Roby Brock, joined by John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be here.
We awaken on a Monday morning to the news that the legendary civil rights attorney, State Representative John Walker, has passed away at the age of 82, apparently natural causes. I guess let's just begin first of all. What do you think? How big is John Walker in Arkansas modern political history?
Oh, I think if you were to name the top three figures in modern Arkansas political history, he's there with Bill Clinton, and I don't know who the other one is. Maybe Winthrop Rockefeller. This context. Arkansas has a history of racism. It has a current practice in some areas of lingering racism for 70s, 80s, 90s, for 5 decades. This man has been the leader of the fight against that in behalf of the African American cause for equal education and integrated schools in this state. And you find a lot of people over the years who became exasperated with his intransigence and his zealotry and the fact that he was not compromising, and who thought he was making more trouble than was necessary to make to advance his cause. But the fact is, he was a champion of equal educational opportunity in a state that needed that champion, and he was it with commitment, but also brilliance. He actually was a brilliant courtroom attorney. So it's a great loss, and one young folks ought to appreciate and ought to be made to understand.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that fascinates me. He was born in Hope, Arkansas. He actually moved to Houston, Texas to finish high school because the schools weren't integrated here. He couldn't get beyond a certain level of education down in Hope, Arkansas. He was admitted to the University of Texas. Have you ever heard this story about what happened to him?
Tell me.
It's interesting. He wanted to be an engineer. How many people in Little Rock and in Arkansas do you think wish he would have gone into engineering versus a lawyer in there?
Well, it would have changed the history of the state.
It would have changed the history of the state. He has found through FOI over the years, he had found the letters from the dean of the engineering school and the president of the University of Texas denying him that entrance to admission because he was a black man. And if you don't think that maybe shaped some of his direction in life, I mean, these are the things that I think made him a champion of some of the causes.
He also, I believe, I won't tell this brief story because I think he taught me better than anything else in one brief moment the very essence of American criminal justice. I was a kid just back to Little Rock, a general assignment reporter at the Gazette, and I got called to jury duty. And I wind up in the box. Now, I'm going to get kicked out eventually by the prosecution after they figure out who I am and what I think. But I'm in the box, and during the questioning, Walker is the defense attorney for a young black man accused of, as it was, I think, aggravated robbery. And I didn't really know or appreciate who John Walker was or just where I was and who I was dealing with. I'm just in the box. But Walker is walking in front of the jury, and he looks at the names, and he calls on a man sitting next to me, just as if random. I mean, he calls him by name and said, what's the crime committed here in this case? And the guy said, I don't know, what was it, aggravated robbery? Walker says, wrong. There is no crime. There is no crime in this case. This is you're a blank slate. This courtroom is a blank slate. You are the peers who are here to give my client his day in court. And at this point, nothing has happened. And until those people prove it happened and that my client did it, which they cannot do, there is no crime here. And I thought, that's American criminal justice right there. And he just taught it to me. And I've carried that brief anecdote with me forever. And a lot of people think our courts are for the victims of the crime, and eventually they are. But the central point is to give this accused his day in court and wipe the slate clean and make the case be made. That's what they're there for.
Innocent until proven guilty.
And he taught it powerfully just in that moment. And excused that fella, by the way, from service. So he got off the jury just as I did for entirely different reasons.
So let's talk about what you think John Walker's legacy will be in terms of particularly the Little Rock School District. I mean, he has been, as you mentioned, for 5 decades at the core of the desegregation case that is at times roiled the Little Rock School District,
Yes.
at times made the Little Rock School District a wonderful school district. I mean, I can recount my time growing up. I wouldn't have had a lot of the experiences that I would have had if it had not been for his push for integration.
You
in
mean
public schools.
you're forced eventually, essentially, your forced association with African American classmates.
I was a child of the 70s and the 80s in grade school through high school. We were bused all over the city. I mean, I would count that many of the friendships I have in adulthood today are based on the fact that I went to an integrated
And you grew
school.
as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That's his legacy. Now, others will say, I mean, that his legacy is this pattern of destruction of the Little Rock schools and the trouble we find just, you use the word roiling, boiling over at times, including now with the state takeover and the whole issue of whether the teachers go on strike and whether certain billionaire businessmen are trying to undo regular public schools. I mean, Little Rock is just a case study of all the issues of contemporary education and race. But the fact is, without John Walker, without his talent and his vigilance, the kinds of experiences you had would not exist. He was absolutely dedicated and unrelenting and smart, and he served a vital social, cultural, political purpose. Even late in life elected to the State House of Representatives during an overrun Republican era. I enjoyed watching his biplane committees with some of these very conservative Republicans who would have to consent sometimes the points that he was making. Now they would move on to the general conservative orthodoxy. But what a force. And we need forces like that. And sometimes we get mad at them, and sometimes we think the outcome is destructive. But that's how change is made, and that's how our major issues, our major moral issues, have to be fought sometimes.
There are critics of his that will say he built the school district for millions of dollars over the years, that once the integration actually was achieved, he kept pushing for something more that was not as well defined as
Right.
the initial integration and the busing was. Why do you think that he didn't feel like we had reached a certain point? Do you have any sense of that?
There was a Saturday morning years ago when I'm on the phone with him, and I'm telling him about liberal-minded white people who are just aghast that he's been hanging out at Pulaski Heights School looking for some sort of pattern of disciplinary discrimination in the school. And I said, why don't you just stop that? I mean, that was essentially my question. He said, I'm not sure what you would have me do. What if I have clients, and if I have reports of that they have been aggrieved or mistreated? I understand that your liberal friends there in Hillcrest and Heights are a little put off at me, but what would you have me do? I didn't have a good answer other than, could you just try to be a little more pragmatic every once in a while? And he said, specifically, what would you have me do? So yeah, that's the story of John Walker. You can find things that you can find exasperating, but through it all, it was hard to attack him on a point of the appropriateness of what he thought he had to do, and that was what it was all about.
Well, there will be a lot of accolades, a lot of reflection,
a lot
and
of
memories,
analysis like ours.
Yes, exactly,
yes.
On his life and times, and I look forward to more of that. Just for everybody to know out there, I actually sat down with John Walker through your Life Quest
yes.
group out there this summer.
Did a Q&A with him in front of a class.
I do have about an hour-long podcast with him, and I will have to tighten that up and get that out there for everybody. It's a fascinating reflection on his upbringing, his early
that
years.
University of Texas story in there?
That University of Texas story is in there. There's another fascinating story in there of how he helped integrate University Park, that neighborhood over there in Midtown, and how it was that was not the direction it was originally supposed to go. There's an interesting story of how he worked at that. He was
his life of 2 years is a modern history of Arkansas.
Well, I offer his family and friends and colleagues a lot of comfort in this time of their loss there. So, John Brummett, as always, thank you.
Thank you, my man.
All right, appreciate it. That's all for today's program. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.
You'll find us at the end of a lot of long country roads, covering over 60% of the great state of Arkansas. Our 17 electric distribution cooperatives are working day and night to provide reliable, affordable power to over 500,000 homes, farms, and businesses, just like yours. The Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas, your local energy partners.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.